In this video I'm going to be going over some closing thoughts after my Best in Slot series, which if you haven't seen I highly recommend. But yeah, some Best in Slot closing thoughts. Here we go. Now, first of all, the idea behind Best in Slot is, it's quite simple really. I want to make a strikers build. What are the best things I can put onto strikers to get the most out of it? That's Best in Slot. What meta is after you've compiled all of your Best in Slot builds, what one categorically performs the best. So this is the difference between meta and Best in Slot. This can also then fluctuate. So typically in open world scenarios like I'm doing now, the meta is the build I'm running now. 4-piece Hunter's Fury, Chain Killer, and the Gift Backpack, an M870 shotgun, and Regulus. This is categorically the meta for open world. If I was to take this into Legendary DUA, this would also perform very well. It's pretty much the standard build that we use for our speedruns. However, if we were to take this into Legendary Manning Zoo, no, not so much. At that point, the meta becomes Coyote's Mask, 4-piece Strikers, Fox's Prayer, and Scorpio. So there's kind of like an umbrella of metas, depending on what it is you're doing, what mission you're in, what event you're under. There's a variety of different things. This doesn't mean that there aren't other Best in Slot builds that would do very similar in terms of performance. The difference really just comes down to a few percent, and when you start looking into things like meta and Best in Slot builds, those few percent really do start to add up. Now, before we dive too deep into this, I need to give a massive shout out to both Rausey and iKia. Their work has been instrumental in all of my testing, and without either of them then this entire video series would not have happened, let alone be done in the time that it actually was done, considering they basically did 90% of the work for me. So yeah, there are links in the description which I implore you to check out. The first link is going to be to Rausey's recommended builds. He does so much work for the community on this, and he's near enough considered to be like god tier in terms of a builder or theory crafter, as well as iKia, who has done so much work helping out new players. He's created like brand new Steam profiles and help desks, and like, yeah, he's literally customer support for I don't know what to make my build, help me, and he's there. He's brilliant. Now, there are going to be a few discrepancies, and just to hopefully make this a bit more simple, is Rausey and I had a in-depth conversation about what would be the best in slot pieces to put on a Heartbreaker build. I found that it was Fox's Prayer, as it was outperforming Seska Knees by 1.2% roughly. And Rausey found it was Seska Knees because it was outperforming Fox's Prayer by about the same amount of damage. This led into a hefty, long conversation about what the hell is actually going on. Is one of us doing something wrong? And it turns out that in terms of DPS comparisons, Rausey was doing it on body shots and I was doing it on headshots. Yes, that does make a difference. However, if you find discrepancies between all of our work, it is most likely someone's doing it on heads, someone's doing it on body, someone's doing it 50% body, 50% head, someone's doing it baseline, someone's doing it with crit added in. Maybe there's also just a slight difference in the attachment setups on the weapon. Literally 1% here and there can make a pretty large difference, but you will find, I've already checked over all of their work as well as all of mine, where I've not made dumb mistakes by putting the wrong bloody image up. Sorry for SMG Part 2. But yeah, all of our work is basically identical. We all pretty much agree on what are the top tier builds. They've got a few more than me just because I set really ridiculous rules in. Otherwise, there would have been probably 8 parts to AR, 4 parts to MMR. Like, I didn't even do tip of the spear for MMR. There's just so much to go over. So I put ridiculous rules in within like a 5 or 10% margin, and if it didn't go within that margin, I didn't include it. There are also things like this. What one's better? 4-piece tip of the spears, chain killer with Dodge City holster, or 4-piece tip of the spear with chain killer and the gift, for example. A headshot backpack with vigilance. Now, in terms of performance, they're actually basically identical. The difference really being is the one with the gift will have higher damage on things like Nemesis, White Death, whatever the MMR it is that you are using. It will have higher damage. However, no matter how high you think that damage could be, there is literally no way it will outperform the TAC 50. And being the fact that the tip of the spear, 1, bolsters the TAC 50 just that little bit more, and 2, gives you 2 TAC 50 ammo rather than 1 every minute. It eliminates the need to be under pressure to hit that one shot every minute, because the tip of the spear buff also only lasts for 1 minute, meaning you're going to have to be pretty damn on point with your TAC 50 shot to maximise the full use of the buff, where if you use the backpack, you don't. It also allows you to use things like, I've just put Dodge City holster in just because that's what I personally use, and as discussed many times on this channel, Dodge City holster is absolutely amazing for utility. It's a free stack for headhunters as long as you can hit the head. It keeps rushers at bay. It is essentially just a free shot that allows you to do so much damage, crack chungers, break warhounds, just delete an enemy altogether regardless. It's just a very useful piece. So in terms of which one of these builds is actually best in slot, it's both as well as neither. They're near enough identical, and it all depends on what you as the player are, 1, comfortable with. That's going to be like the main thing. If you are a more proficient sniper, then I would suggest going for a vigilance backpack. If you're not, like me, going for the tips backpack, which gives you more TAC 50 ammo, which is going to be of more use to you, as well as giving you something like Dodge City holster, or even if you wanted something to give you armor on kill, it adds a bit more variety into it. Now, this was just a very long-winded way of saying just because something may or may not be best in slot doesn't mean you can or cannot use it, and it also means you can't use the base idea of what that build is designed to do or its performance and change things up a bit. I gave a pretty good example of this on my AR build. I showed how I sacrificed 10% total DPS to use an AR that I am more comfortable with, as well as opt in to using Dodge City holster on my build to allow me a lot more utility. So if you are a new player or player that's just looking for something a bit extra, do not feel pressured that you must run these builds or have a few of these builds under your belt. Obviously, I would recommend getting a few of these, particularly the striker builds. They are very, very powerful for DPS, so they do come with a recommendation. However, you don't have to use them, or at the very least, if you want to use them, you don't have to use them how I have advertised them, or how Rausey advertised his builds, or even iKia. You are free to make your own decisions, obviously. They are build skeletons, as it were. This would be the best you could do, but feel free to add in whatever it is you actively want on your build. If you want to put a bit of armor regen in there, go for it. Would recommend armor on kill over armor regen. There are a variety of different things that we are able to do in this game. Experiment, play around with it. You never know, you might stumble across the new meta. Absolutely up to you. Now, from here, I would like to add the caveat to this that just because you've seen a video of XYZ person do something with a build doesn't necessarily mean that that is a very good build. What you don't see behind the scenes of even me doing this is my 3rd recording doing this video, because I kept on making dumb mistakes and it looked terrible, and I died a little bit too often to my liking because I was just overzealous and pushed too much. So what you don't see behind people going, oh my god guys, one man army OP legendary build, is the 50 tries they took to actually even get that one recording. Like I said, this is my 3rd recording and I'm just running around in the open world. As well as, on that note, Memento. I could not tell you how many times people have come to me going, Memento's best in slot, how many times I've had an argument about Memento not being best in slot, X, Y, Z. Now, I have covered from what I believe to be the vast majority of the best in slot builds. Would you like to know how many times Memento showed an appearance? Twice. Does this mean Memento is bad? No. Am I saying Memento is bad? No. What I'm saying is you don't need to put Memento on every damn build. Most of the time, Memento is actually not going to help you. This doesn't mean that it's not a powerful backpack. This doesn't mean it's not a good backpack. It is a pretty damn good backpack. The problem is, with the way in which these games are set out, your best defense is literally your offense. The meta, the best in slot, is kill things quicker. That is literally it. And when it comes to DPS, which is how these things are calculated, Memento is not that good. There are scenarios where Memento is going to be very handy, but it's typically on builds that already have the DPS. They don't need any more DPS. They just need that little bit of an edge in terms of typically utilizing a shield, because one backpack, 2 cores. That's a skill tier 2 shield immediately. That's basically it. Now, with this in mind, and I actually had a lot of trouble with this in a previous game I used to play a lot called Monster Hunter World, and I kind of wanted to actually get a few clips of this, but yeah, sadly I've basically got to start that game again, which is going to be fun. Right, general gist of this is there were 2 sets of people. You had people like myself that would argue the meta is essentially maximum damage 100% of the time, or as close to 100% of the time as you could get. And then there was the more casual player base that was like, no, the meta is things like Divine Protection, which is essentially gave you 50% damage mitigation for X amount of time. Defense Boost, which obviously gave you more defense, more armor, so blue cores essentially. And it kind of cascaded out of control, and it became quite a toxic, almost elitist environment on both sides. Now, the idea behind running more defense is just the simple fact that in this game, if you've not played it, the monsters basically 1 or 2 hit you all the time. And there are some monsters at certain levels that doesn't matter what you're running, you will just get one shot. However, the idea behind going maximum damage is there are what we call topple counters. If you hit them in the left arm enough times, they fall over. If you hit them in the head enough times, they fall over. Now, it's not so much enough times, it's you need to do a certain amount of damage. So you need to do 1000 damage to the head. Now, there are builds where you can easily do 1000 damage to the head in one hit. Hit them in the head, 1000 damage, they fall over. You now get to hit them again on repeat until they stand up. And then you hit them in the head because it will go up each time. Now 1500 damage. Cool, you've now got to do 2 hits on the head. They fall over. You now get to do all of your maximum damage again. So in terms of efficiency, going maximum damage in a game like Monster Hunter is 100%, I'll argue it to the day I die, 100% more beneficial and efficient than going for things like defense boost and armor regen or whatever. But obviously this is a different game. How this then translates into games like Division 2 are things like vigilance, glass cannon, focus. These are very, very powerful talents. But one thing that these talents have in common with as well, going back to Monster Hunter, is being able to hit that monster in the head to make it fall over. It assumes that 1, you have the player skill to get to the head and hit it within a certain amount of time before the monster hits you and kills you. It also assumes that you can hit the actual swing of your weapon or the shot. This is the same thing when it comes to things like glass cannon. Yes, categorically things like glass cannon, vigilance, focus are going to be best in slot for at least 90% of builds. However, one thing the math doesn't show you is you have to be at a skill level, kind of, that is able to utilize that efficiently. recently had a comment from someone arguing against this, and although their point is kind of grounded, it literally does just read once you get through it all, because they're unable to keep vigilance active. When they're running glass cannon, they spend more time in cover and having to use armor kits. This is not a build issue. The builds are fine. The difficulty that this person will be having is they're not of a skill level to be able to use these things effectively. Think of it as driving a car. No one turns, I don't know what age you'd have to be to drive a car in other countries, but over here in the UK, no one turns 17, gets a car, and then is just magically able to drive and is suddenly the best driver on the planet. You have to have lessons. You have to be taught how to do it. You go through exams. You have to apply for a license. This is a real world example of learning and persevering. Then at the end of it all, you put all of the knowledge that you've gained and accumulated, then you put it all into an exam. Hopefully you pass the exam, and now you're a licensed driver. It's a poor example, but this is kind of the same thing of Perfect Glass Cannon. When I first started playing this game, I was much like many of the people that have messaged and commented on my videos, being like, Perfect Glass Cannon is not for them. Whether they just outright hate it and think it's a bad talent, or they can't get along with it because of the amount of damage that they take and end up being in cover a lot more, or having to utilize too many armor kits, or they get more use out of other talents because they're not forced into cover as much. All of these are perfectly valid points. However, there are ways in which you're able to get around the use of Perfect Glass Cannon. One, just make friends with the cover. It is a cover-to-cover looter shooter. Okay, just to put it into example, the maximum health / armor I have seen on a player is like 4 million. For your average player, like health and armor, you get like 4 million. Enemies have like 20 million plus, some of them, depending on what difficulty you're playing at. Like the average elite on heroic has 9 million armor. You might also notice that shotguns at close range basically one-shot us, whereas for us, unless you're playing a headhunter build, you're stuck doing 3, 4, 5 shots. It is inherently obvious that the enemies are, in a nutshell, despite the fact they're not division agents, they got that weird hillbilly funding, are decidedly more powerful than you. Everything is quite spongy and hits pretty damn hard once you get to a certain point in the game, especially if you start then going into legendary. Yeah. So when it comes to things like glass cannon, vigilance, focus, it's kind of annoying to say because I know someone's going to go, but consoles. But try and aim for the head just a little bit more. You haven't got to like get all of your bullets on the head. Just try and get a few more headshots. 1, headshots do more damage. 2, headshots cause the enemies to stagger, which allows you to get more shots in, therefore getting more DPS in. It is at this point when you realise why something is the best in slot. So the idea behind things like vigilance, glass cannon, focus is, it's not the build is bad or wrong or anything, it's the math is kind of a dick and it assumes you know how to use these things to get the most out of them. Anyway, me dying there is the cue to end this video. Have fun, good luck, and don't die. It's bad for the health.